The sky above Velthra burned with alien fire as Commander Zeftai watched his world die from the command center of Orbital Station 7. The Vex swarm had arrived 3 days ago, their massive black ships blotting out the twin suns that had warmed his people for thousands of years. Now those same ships rained death upon the crystal cities below, turning everything beautiful into ash and ruin. Zeftai pressed his 6-fingered hands against the viewing port, his crystalline skin reflecting the orange glow of destruction. The Kethari had always been a peaceful people, spending their long lives studying medicine and philosophy. They had no weapons, no armies, no knowledge of war. When the first Vex ships appeared at the edge of their solar system, the Council had tried to communicate, to reason, to offer their vast medical knowledge in exchange for peace. The Vex had responded by consuming 3 outer colonies without a single word. Below on the planet's surface, evacuation transports moved like silver insects between the falling towers. Families clutched their children as they ran through streets that had known only peace for 10,000 years. The underground shelters could hold maybe half the population, and even those would not last long once the Vex began their ground assault. Zeftai had seen the reports from other worlds. The Vex did not simply kill. They consumed everything, living, breaking it down, and rebuilding it into more of themselves. His aide, a young female named Lythara, approached with trembling steps. Her usually bright blue skin had turned pale with fear. "Commander, the defense platforms are down to 30% power. The energy shields around the capital city are failing. The Council asks if you have any new orders." Zeftai closed his eyes and felt the weight of his entire species pressing down on him. As military commander, he had spent his career managing peaceful trade routes and organizing cultural exchanges. He had never fired a weapon in anger. None of them had. That was their strength and their weakness. In a galaxy filled with violence, the Kethari had remained pure. Now that purity would see them all dead. "How long until the evacuation is complete?" he asked. 17 hours for the minimum safe number. 29 hours for everyone. "We have perhaps 6 hours before the orbital platforms fall." Lythara said nothing. They both knew what that meant. When the platforms fell, the Vex would begin landing their bio-titans on the surface. After that, the underground shelters would become tombs. Zeftai walked to his command console and stared at the communications array. For weeks, the Galactic Federation had sent messages of support and sympathy, but no ships, no weapons, no real help. The Federation was vast and powerful, but they fought wars with committees and debates. By the time they decided to act, Velthara would be another dead world feeding the Vex swarm. But there was one option. One desperate, foolish option that the Council had already rejected. His fingers moved across the controls, accessing the restricted files. There, buried in diplomatic archives, was the contact information for a species that most of the galaxy preferred to ignore. Humans, the barbaric newcomers from a small blue world called Earth. They had joined the Federation only 50 years ago, and most civilized species considered them dangerous and unpredictable. The humans fought wars for sport, consumed animal flesh, and showed an alarming tendency to solve problems with violence. The Kethari Council had voted against establishing formal relations with Earth 3 times. Too primitive, they said. Too violent. Too different from civilized peoples. But the reports said humans were the only species in the galaxy that actually enjoyed fighting. While others spent centuries debating the ethics of warfare, humans had spent their entire history perfecting it. They had turned killing into an art form, and they seemed to take pride in fighting impossible battles. Zeftai opened a communication channel to the human frontier colonies. He had no authority to do this. The Council would be furious. But the Council was currently hiding in bunkers while their world burned above them. The signal took several minutes to reach the nearest human outpost. When the response came, it was in heavily accented galactic standard, spoken by someone who clearly was not used to formal diplomatic language. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Colonial Defense Force, New Dakota Station." "Who am I talking to?" Zeftai took a deep breath. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Zeftai of the Kethari Defense Command. We are under attack by the Vex swarm. Our world is dying." There was a pause. "The Vex? Those bug machine things that have been eating planets out in the Rim territories?" "Yes. They arrived 3 days ago. We have no military, no weapons capable of fighting them. Our people are being evacuated to underground shelters, but we estimate 6 hours before our orbital defenses fall. After that, Zeftai let the words hang, in the air. How many people we talking about here? 4 billion Kethari live on Velthara. Perhaps 2 billion can reach shelter. The rest will die when the Vex begin their surface assault. Another pause. Longer this time. Commander, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Why are you calling us? The Federation has thousands of ships, trained militaries, all that fancy equipment. We humans have maybe 12 working warships and a bunch of cargo haulers with guns bolted on. Why call the crazy humans instead of your fancy galactic neighbors? Zeftai looked out at the burning sky again. A Vex harvester ship was descending toward the northern continent, its organic hull pulsing with malevolent life. Soon it would begin converting everything it touched into more Vex creatures. Because, he said quietly, the Federation will spend 3 weeks debating the proper response while my people die. Because civilized species do not charge into hopeless battles against overwhelming odds. Because when death comes from the stars, sometimes the only answer is to be as savage as death itself. The human captain was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. Commander, I'm going to put you through to Earth Command. Keep this channel open. And Commander, you called the right people. Humans don't like bullies, and we really don't like seeing kids get hurt. We'll figure something out. The signal transferred, and Zeftai found himself speaking to a human admiral named Lisa Carter. Her voice was crisp and professional, but he could hear something underneath it. Something that sounded like barely controlled anger. Commander Zeftai, I've been monitoring your situation through our intelligence networks. The Vex swarm has been a concern for some time. How long can your people hold out? 6 hours, maybe less. Our nearest battle group is 3 weeks away, at maximum burn. Zeftai felt his heart sink. I understand, Admiral. Thank you for considering our request. Hold on, Commander. I said our nearest battle group was 3 weeks out. I didn't say we weren't coming. Admiral Carter's voice took on a tone that sent chills through Zeftai's crystalline spine. Captain Morrison's colonial fleet can be ready to move in 2 hours. It's not much, but it's what we have. And, Commander, we're not coming to debate or negotiate. We're coming to fight. Keep your people alive until we get there. The communication ended, leaving Zeftai staring at the console in amazement. In less than 10 minutes, the humans had agreed to do what the entire Galactic Federation had been unable to decide upon in 3 days. They were coming. The savage humans with their primitive ships and violent ways were coming to help. For the first time in 3 days, Commander Zeftai allowed himself to hope. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room at Earth Command, staring at the massive display showing the Velthara system. Red icons marked Vex positions, while blue dots represented the dying Kethari orbital platforms. The situation was worse than she had initially thought. Intelligence reports showed at least 40 Vex capital ships in orbit, with more arriving every hour. It was a slaughter, not a battle. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the communication screen from New Dakota Station. His weathered face showed the kind of determination that had carried humanity through 1,000 wars on their homeworld. Behind him, Carter could see crew members running between control stations, preparing ships that had never been designed for this kind of fight. Admiral, I've got 8 ships ready to move. The Defiance, Wolverine, Phoenix, Ranger, Liberty, Patriot, Thunder, and Guardian. Most of them are converted cargo haulers and mining vessels. We've stripped out everything non-essential and loaded. Every weapon we could find. It's not pretty, but it'll have to do. Carter nodded. The human colonial fleet was a joke compared to Federation warships. Where alien vessels were sleek and efficient, human ships looked like flying scrapyards held, together with determination and prayer. But they had one advantage that no other species in the galaxy possessed. Human crews would fight until their ships broke apart around them. What about personnel, Jake? Lieutenant Colonel Pete Jackson is loading the 1st Orbital Assault Battalion, as we speak. 500 Marines, all volunteers. Major Kelly Brooks has her engineering corps ready to go. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ben Parker is bringing everything we know about alien biology. Morrison paused. Admiral, most of these kids have never seen real combat. Hell, most of them signed up thinking they'd be fighting pirates and smugglers. And now they're going up against an enemy that eats planets for breakfast. Yes, ma'am, but they're still going. Every single one of them volunteered when they heard about the Kethari situation. Seems nobody likes the idea of kids hiding in bunkers while monsters tear their world apart. Carter felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. Humans were foolish and violent and completely insane by galactic standards. They also had a stubborn refusal to let innocent people die while they stood by and watched. It was going to get them all killed someday, but not today. Today it might just save an entire civilization. Give me a full tactical breakdown, Captain. Morrison's image was replaced by a strategic display of the human fleet. Carter winced as she saw the details. The UES Defiance was Morrison's flagship, a heavy cruiser that had been built from spare destroyer parts and a mining ship's hull. The Wolverine under Captain Danny Rodriguez was supposed to be a fast attack vessel, but it looked more like a cargo container with engines bolted on. Captain Amy Sullivan's Phoenix was the only ship that actually resembled a proper warship, and even it was 10 years past its recommended service life. The rest of the fleet was even worse. Converted miners, refitted cargo haulers, and one ship that Carter was pretty sure had started life as a passenger liner. They carried weapons that were primitive by Federation standards and armor that would barely stop small arms fire. Against the Vex bioships with their living hulls and adaptive systems, the human fleet would last maybe 10 minutes in a straight fight. But Carter had not climbed to Admiral by fighting fair battles. Jake, you're not going there to win a fleet. Engagement. Your job is to extract as many civilians as possible and make the Vex pay for every life they take. Hit and run, boarding actions, ramming attacks if necessary. Make them think twice about easy targets. Understood, Admiral. What about Federation support? Carter's expression darkened. The Federation Council is still debating whether to classify this as a border incident or an act of war. They'll have a decision sometime next month, assuming the committee can agree on lunch plans. She leaned forward. Jake, you're going in alone. No backup, no support, and definitely no extraction if things go bad. The political situation here is complicated. Morrison actually smiled at that. Admiral, with respect, when has the political situation ever been simple? We'll make do with what we have. We always do. As the communication ended, Carter turned to her intelligence officer, Commander Sarah Collins. The young woman had been reviewing Vex tactical data for 3 straight days, trying to find some weakness in their seemingly perfect war machine. What do we know about their capabilities, Sarah? Collins brought up a series of displays showing Vex bioships in action. The vessels were nightmarish combinations of technology and living tissue, growing and adapting as they fought. They're unlike anything in our databases, Admiral. The ships are actually living creatures, bred for war. They can repair damage in real time, adapt to enemy weapons, and they reproduce by consuming organic matter from conquered worlds. Weaknesses? They're predictable in some ways. They always follow the same pattern: orbital bombardment, atmospheric, processors, ground assault with bio-titans, then harvesting. They don't seem to expect resistance after the initial defense falls. Most species just surrender once they realize they're outgunned. Carter studied the tactical reports from 17 dead worlds. The Vex were efficient, brutal, and completely unstoppable by conventional methods. They had consumed entire star systems without losing a single major vessel. But all of their victories had been against civilized species who fought by the rules of warfare. What about their ground forces? Collins switched to a new display showing the bio-titans. Carter had seen the footage before, but it still made her stomach turn. The creatures were the size of city blocks, walking weapons factories that could spawn smaller attack forms as they moved. They're designed to process organic matter into new Vex units. Once they land on a planet, they can create an entire army from the local ecosystem. How long do we have? The Kethari orbital platforms will fall within 4 hours. After that, the bio-titans will begin landing. Morrison's fleet needs 18 hours to reach Velthara at maximum burn. Carter closed her eyes and ran the calculations. The humans would arrive 14 hours after the slaughter began. By then, there might not be anyone left to save. But they would go anyway, because that was what humans did. They charged into hopeless situations because someone had to try. Sarah, get me everything we have on Kethari biology and culture. If we're going to extract their people, we need to understand how they think and react under pressure. Already. On it, Admiral. The Kethari are fascinating. They're natural empaths with a collective memory going back thousands of years. Their entire society is built around cooperation and harmony. They've never experienced warfare on this scale, which means they'll panic. Worse, they might just give up. Their psychology doesn't include concepts like last stands or fighting retreats. When they realize the situation is hopeless, they might simply stop trying to survive. Carter nodded, grimly. So the humans would not only be fighting an impossible battle against overwhelming odds, they would be doing it to save a people who might not understand the concept of fighting for survival. It was exactly the kind of mission that human commanders dreaded and human soldiers volunteered for without hesitation. She opened a communication channel to Morrison's fleet. The captain appeared on screen again, this time wearing full combat gear. Behind him, she could see Marines loading equipment and checking weapons. Jake, you need to understand something about the people you're going to save. The Kethari don't think like us. They might not cooperate with evacuation efforts if they believe the situation is hopeless. You'll need to convince them that fighting is worthwhile. Morrison considered this. Any suggestions on how to motivate a species that's never seen war? Show them what humans do when the odds are impossible. Show them that some things are worth dying for. Carter paused. And Jake, bring our people home. We'll do our best, Admiral. The communication ended, leaving Carter alone with the tactical, displays, and the weight of command. In 18 hours, she would know if humanity's first real intervention in galactic affairs would end in heroic success or glorious failure. Either way, the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velthara system, and Captain Jake Morrison immediately knew they were too late. The orbital platforms that had defended the Kethari homeworld were nothing but debris clouds now, glowing, metal fragments spinning slowly in the darkness. Below them, the planet's surface showed the orange glow of massive fires. The Vex had begun their harvest. Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display populate, with enemy contacts. 43 Vex bioships hung in orbit like malevolent tumors, their organic hulls pulsing with diseased light. 3 massive hive ships had positioned themselves over the major population centers, extending feeding tendrils down into the atmosphere. The sight made Morrison's stomach turn, but his voice remained steady as he opened communications to his fleet. All ships, this is Defiance. Target priority is civilian evacuation. We're not here to win a fleet engagement, we're here to get people out alive. Wolverine and Phoenix, take the northern continent. Ranger and Liberty, you've got the southern cities. Guardian and Patriot will hit the eastern settlements. Thunder stays with me for the capital region. Captain Danny Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm from the Wolverine. Jake, we've got 3 hive ships and about a dozen escort vessels over our target zone. How do you want to play this? Morrison studied the tactical display, counting enemy ships and running calculations in his head. By every rule of space warfare, his small fleet should have turned around and reported the situation to Earth Command. The Vex had overwhelming numbers, superior technology, and they were fighting in their own conquered territory. It was suicide to engage them directly, which was exactly why Morrison planned to ram the Defiance straight down their throats. All ships, listen up. The Vex have been eating civilized species for breakfast because everyone tries to fight them the civilized way. Standoff engagements, energy weapons, tactical withdrawals when things get messy. But here's the thing about humans. We don't fight civilized. Morrison's voice took on a tone that his crew had learned to recognize. We're going in close and personal. Ramming speed, boarding actions, and if your ship gets taken, you make damn sure it takes some of them with you when it goes down. Lieutenant Colonel Pete Jackson's voice came over the comm from the troop bay. Skipper, my Marines are ready for insertion. Just get us close enough to smell their breath. Morrison almost smiled at that. Jackson's 1st Orbital Assault Battalion consisted of 500 volunteers who had signed up thinking they would be fighting smugglers and pirates. Instead, they were about to board alien bioships that could literally digest them alive, but not one of them had backed down when they learned the truth. All ships, execute insertion protocol Alpha. Hit them. Fast, hit them hard, and remember, every minute we keep their attention is another minute for civilians to reach shelter. The human fleet accelerated toward the Vex formation, their ungainly ships looking like flying scrap piles compared to the sleek bio-vessels. But appearances were deceiving. Morrison's engineers had stripped out everything non-essential and replaced it with weapons, armor, and attitude. The ships might not be pretty, but they were built to take punishment and keep fighting. The first Vex escort vessels moved to intercept, their organic weapons charging with bioelectric energy. Morrison watched them approach on his display, waiting until they were close enough to see individual weapon ports before giving his next order. All ships, emergency deceleration, full reverse thrust on my mark. Mark! The human fleet suddenly reversed direction, their powerful mining ship engines bringing them to a near stop in space. The Vex vessels, expecting the humans to maintain course, overshot their targets by several thousand kilometers. For a few precious seconds, the alien ships were confused and out of position. Morrison didn't waste the opportunity. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Take them from behind. The human vessels spun around and accelerated again, this time directly toward the rear of the Vex formation. Captain Amy Sullivan's Phoenix fired the first shots, her particle cannons punching holes through the organic hull of a Vex cruiser. The alien ship writhed in space as biofluids leaked from the wounds, but it was far from dead. Rodriguez brought the Wolverine alongside a Vex escort and opened fire with everything he had. Mining lasers, particle beams, and old-fashioned kinetic rounds tore into the bioship's flanks. The alien vessel tried to regenerate its damaged sections, but Rodriguez kept firing at the same spots, preventing the healing process from completing. Morrison guided the Defiance toward the nearest hive ship, the massive creature that was slowly digesting the Kethari capital city below. The bioship was easily 10 times the size of his cruiser, its hull covered in weapon pods and defensive systems. It should have been able to swat the human ship like an annoying insect. Instead, Morrison did something that no civilized species had ever attempted. He aimed the Defiance directly at the hive ship's main feeding port and ordered maximum thrust. The collision alarm sounded across the bridge as the human ship accelerated toward its target. Morrison's crew strapped themselves into their crash positions, but none of them looked afraid. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing it was likely a one-way trip. The Defiance struck the hive ship's feeding port at 17% of light speed, its reinforced prow punching deep into the alien vessel's organic interior. The impact shook both ships, sending biofluids and debris spinning into space. But instead of pulling back, Morrison ordered his engines to keep firing. All Marines, this is your stop. Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to hurt them, so bad they think twice about coming back. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson led his Marines through the breach in the bioship's hull, their weapons firing at everything that moved. The interior of the Vex vessel was a nightmare of organic corridors and living machinery. But the Marines adapted quickly. Sergeant Tony Martinez discovered that standard explosives worked just fine on bioship components, while Corporal Lisa Hayes found that flamethrowers could prevent the ship from regenerating damaged sections. On the planet's surface, Commander Sarah Collins was flying impossible rescue missions through the debris-filled atmosphere. Her transport ship dodged falling chunks of orbital platform while searching for Keith Hari evacuation sites. The alien civilians were tall and graceful, with crystalline skin that reflected light like living jewels. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of millennia of peaceful evolution. They also had no idea how to respond to the chaos erupting around them. Collins landed her transport in what had once been a beautiful crystal plaza, now littered with rubble and burning debris. Kethari families stood in the open, staring up at the battle raging in orbit above them. Many seemed to be in shock, unable to process the violence that had shattered their peaceful world. Dr. Rachel Kim, the fleet's xenobiologist, was the first to make contact. She approached a group of Kethari elders, her medical scanner detecting their elevated stress levels and electromagnetic signatures. "We're here to help," she said in their musical language, hoping her pronunciation was close enough to be understood. "You need to come with us. We can take you to safety." The eldest Kethari, a female with silver-blue skin, looked at her with eyes like cut crystal. "You are the humans, the violent ones from the outer systems." "Yes. And right now, violence is the only thing that can save you." The elder watched as another human transport landed nearby, disgorging Marines who immediately began setting up defensive positions. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons trained on the sky where Vex drop pods were beginning to fall like deadly rain. "Your people fight for us," the elder said. It was not a question. Our people fight for anyone who needs help. That's what we do. Above them, the space battle continued to rage. Morrison's fleet was taking heavy casualties, but they were inflicting damage that the Vex had never experienced before. Human ships rammed alien vessels, Marines boarded bioships and set off explosions from within, and damaged human vessels were deliberately crashed into Vex formations rather than abandoned. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Vex swarm was learning what it meant to face an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to retreat, and refused to die quietly. The elder Kethari looked up at the burning sky, then back at Dr. Kim. "Your species is insane." "Yes, ma'am." "Completely." "Crazy! Now let's get your people out of here before the real fighting starts." The evacuation had been going well for 3 hours when everything went wrong at once. Major Kelly Brooks watched from her command post as massive bio-titans began emerging from the largest Vex hive ships, their forms blotting out entire sections of sky as they descended toward the planet's surface. Each creature was the size of a city block, covered in weapon pods and spawning chambers that could produce hundreds of smaller attack forms. Brooks keyed her radio to the fleet command frequency. "Defiance, this is ground control. We've got incoming. Bio-Titans, estimate 12 major forms heading for the evacuation zones. Recommend immediate orbital support." Captain Morrison's voice crackled back through heavy static. His ship was still lodged in the side of a Vex hive ship, fighting a running battle through the alien vessel's organic corridors. "Ground control, we're kinda busy up here. You're going to have to handle the big ones yourselves." Brooks looked up at the descending Titans and tried not to think about how completely screwed they all were. Her engineering corps consisted of 60 specialists whose job was supposed to be building prefab shelters and maintaining mining equipment. Now they were the last line of defense between 4 billion Kethari civilians and an enemy that could literally eat planets. "All engineering units, this is Brooks. Time to see if those mining charges work on something other than rocks. Target the Titans' leg joints and spawning chambers. If we can't kill them, maybe we can slow them down long enough for the transports to clear the area." Sergeant Tony Martinez had just finished setting demolition charges inside a Vex escort vessel when the Bio-Titans began their descent. He and his squad were fighting their way back to the insertion point, but the ship's organic corridors kept changing configuration, trying to trap them inside. Worse, the bioship was beginning to digest their equipment, turning their own weapons against them. Martinez pulled the pins on his remaining grenades and tossed them into what looked like the ship's central nervous system. The explosion sent biofluids spraying in all directions, and the corridor walls began convulsing in apparent pain. But instead of weakening the ship, the damage seemed to make it angry. "Squad, we're leaving now," Martinez called to his remaining Marines. "This thing's about to get personal." They fought their way back through increasingly hostile corridors as the bioship's immune system began producing antibodies specifically designed to kill humans. Martinez lost 2 Marines to organic acid sprays and another to what could only be described as weaponized cancer. By the time they reached the insertion point, only half his squad remained, but they had bought precious time for the civilian evacuation, and that was what mattered. On the planet's surface, Dr. Rachel Kim was making a discovery that would change everything. While treating wounded Kethari in a makeshift field hospital, she noticed that her medical scanners kept malfunctioning whenever the aliens were nearby. At first, she thought it was equipment failure, but then she realized the pattern. The Kethari were naturally generating electromagnetic interference. She grabbed her radio and called Major Brooks. "Kelly, I need you to listen carefully. The Kethari emit natural EM fields that interfere with our equipment. But if it affects our scanners, it might affect Vex navigation systems too." Brooks was busy directing the defense of Evacuation Zone 7 when Kim's message came through. She was watching her engineers try to place shaped charges on a Bio-Titan's leg joint while the creature spawned attack drones by the hundreds. "Rachel, I'm kinda busy being eaten by a walking building. Here, can this wait?" "No, it can't. Get the Kethari civilians closer to your defensive positions. Their EM fields might disrupt the Vex targeting systems." Brooks looked around at the orderly evacuation lines, where Kethari families waited patiently for transport while her Marines tried to hold off an army of biomechanical nightmares. The idea of using civilians as human shields went against every military principle she had ever learned, but if it would save lives, she would do it. "All units, new tactical directive. Integrate Kethari civilians into defensive positions. Do not repeat, do not treat them as shields. They're part of the defense now. The results were immediate and dramatic. Vex drones that had been picking off Marines with surgical precision suddenly began missing their targets. Bio-Titan weapon systems fired wild, their shots going wide or hitting their own forces. The massive creatures began stumbling as their internal navigation systems struggled with the electromagnetic interference. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson saw the change from his position near the main evacuation center. His Marines had been taking heavy casualties trying to hold the perimeter, but suddenly the Vex attack forces were acting confused and disorganized. He grabbed the nearest Kethari civilian, an elderly male with deep blue crystalline skin. "Sir, I need you and your people to spread out among my soldiers. Stand close to them, but stay behind cover. You're saving lives just by being here." The Kethari elder looked puzzled. "I do not understand. We have no weapons, no military training." Jackson gestured toward a bio-titan that was firing randomly into empty air, its targeting systems completely disrupted by the electromagnetic field surrounding the mixed human Kethari positions. "Sir, you are weapons. You just don't know it yet." In orbit, Captain Morrison was learning that fighting inside a bioship was like being digested slowly while trying to perform surgery. The Defiance was still lodged in the hive ship's feeding port, but the alien vessel was adapting to the human presence. Organic growths were trying to seal off damaged sections, and the ship's immune system was producing increasingly creative ways to kill the human intruders. Morrison's crew had taken refuge in what appeared to be a major nerve center, using the ship's own bioelectric systems to power their remaining weapons. But they were running out of ammunition, air, and time. The bioship was slowly crushing the Defiance's hull, trying to digest the smaller vessel like a massive organism consuming a parasite. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's intercom. "We've done what we came here to do. The evacuation is proceeding, and we've hurt these things badly enough that they'll think twice before trying this again, but it looks like this is where we get off." Chief Engineer Bob Wilson looked up from the jury-rigged control panel he had been using to keep their life support running. "Skipper, I can overload the reactor. If we're going down, we can take this whole hive ship with us." Morrison nodded. "Do it, Bob, and make sure it's big enough that their friends will see it from the other side of the system." Down on the planet, Major Brooks was coordinating the final evacuation flights when she realized what was happening in orbit. The massive explosion of the Defiance's reactor core would provide cover for the last transports, but it would also eliminate their only source of close orbital support. She keyed her radio to all units. "Listen up, people. We just lost our ride home, which means we're going to have to make our own way out of this mess. The good news is we've saved about 60% of the Kethari population. The bad news is the Vex are really pissed off now, and they're sending everything they have left at our position." Sergeant Martinez, who had just returned from his mission inside the bioship, looked around at the mixed human Kethari defensive positions. Marines stood shoulder to shoulder with alien civilians, their weapons trained on an enemy that wanted to consume them all. It should have been a recipe for disaster. Instead, it looked like the beginning of something extraordinary. "Major," he called out, "What are your orders?" Brooks checked her ammunition count, counted her remaining personnel, and calculated the odds of surviving the next hour. The numbers were not encouraging, but she had not come this far to give up now. "We hold this position until the last transport is away. After that, we make the Vex pay for every inch of ground they take. And Sergeant, make sure the Kethari know that this is what humans do when someone threatens kids. We don't run, we don't hide, and we sure as hell don't surrender." As if summoned by her words, the final wave of Vex forces began their assault on the evacuation zone. Bio-Titans advanced through the crystal ruins of the Kethari capital, their spawning chambers producing fresh attack forms with every step. Overhead, the surviving Vex bioships began their final orbital bombardment, determined to eliminate the stubborn human resistance once and for all. But the humans had made their decision. They would stand, they would fight, and they would show the galaxy that some things were worth dying for. 6 months after the Battle of Elthara, Captain Danny Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Kethari colony ship, watching the stars wheel past as they traveled toward their new home. His face bore fresh scars from the bioship boarding actions, and his left arm still ached where Vex acid had eaten through his armor. But he was alive, which was more than anyone had expected when they dropped out of hyperspace that terrible day. The colony ship was unlike anything in the galaxy. Human engineering had been combined with Keth-Hari technology to create something that was both beautiful and deadly. Crystalline hull sections channeled energy more efficiently than any human design, while human weapons systems could punch through threats that would have overwhelmed traditional Keth-Hari vessels. It was a symbol of what the two species could accomplish together. Rodriguez turned as footsteps approached behind him. Elder Myth-Sai, the Keth-Hari leader who had initially opposed contact with humans, walked toward him with the fluid grace of her people. Her crystalline skin had turned a deeper blue since the evacuation, a sign of age and stress among her species. But her eyes held something that had not been there before the battle. Respect. Captain Rodriguez, I wanted to thank you again for what your people did for us. Rodriguez shook his head. Ma'am, we did what anyone should do when kids are in danger. Nothing special about it? But there was something special about it, Myth-Sai insisted. Do you know what the other species call humans now? They call you the Guardians, the species that stands between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. Rodriguez had heard the rumors. Federation species that had once dismissed humans as barbaric primitives were now requesting military alliance treaties. The Centauri Confederacy had already signed a mutual defense pact, and the Rigel Commonwealth was negotiating for human military advisors. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had fundamentally changed humanity's position in galactic politics. But Rodriguez was not thinking about politics. He was thinking about the Marines who had not come home. Elder, we lost a lot of good people at Velthara. Captain Morrison, Major Brooks, Sergeant Martinez, and about 300 others who deserved better than dying in some alien nightmare. Ship. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. Myth-Sai was quiet for a long moment, then gestured toward the viewport. Outside, they could see other ships in their convoy. Human vessels escorting Keth-Hari transports toward a new world, where both species would build something together. Captain, may I tell you about our collective memory? Rodriguez nodded, not sure where this was going. My people remember everything, every great moment, every tragedy, every lesson learned across 10,000 years of history. But until your species came to our aid, we had no memories of heroism. We had no concept of individuals sacrificing themselves for others who were not family, not even the same species. Your Captain Morrison died so that beings he had never met could live. Major Brooks gave her life defending children who were not even human. That is not something the galaxy had seen before. She touched the viewport with one long finger, her crystalline skin reflecting the starlight. We broadcast the truth about the Battle of Velthara to every world in the Federation. We told them how humans charged into impossible odds not for conquest or glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. We told them how human soldiers stood with our civilians, how human engineers gave their lives to hold back the Bio-Titans, how human captains rammed their ships into enemies 10 times their size. Rodriguez felt his throat tighten. And what did the galaxy say to that? They said that perhaps they had misjudged humanity. The Andromedan Council is sending representatives to Earth. The Vegan Free States want to discuss joint research projects. Even the isolationist Tau Ceti Republic is reconsidering their closed borders policy. Myth-Sai smiled, an expression that transformed her alien features into something almost human. Your species has gone from being the violent newcomers to being the people everyone wants as allies. Rodriguez knew she was right. Admiral Carter had sent regular updates about the political changes sweeping through Federation space. Humanity was no longer seen as a dangerous aberration, but as a necessary force for stability. When the Vex had threatened to consume the peaceful species of the galaxy, only humans had been willing to stand up and fight. But there's something else, Myth-Sai continued. The Vex have not attacked another world since Velthara. Our intelligence sources suggest they are reassessing their expansion strategy. For the first time in their existence, they encountered a species that made them pay a price they were not willing to accept. Rodriguez thought about that. The human fleet had been completely destroyed in the battle, but they had taken 12 Vex bioships with them, including 2 of the massive hive ships. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that the Vex could be hurt, could be stopped, could be made to hesitate. A communication chime sounded, and Rodriguez activated the nearest console. Lieutenant Susan Walsh appeared on the screen, her young face serious as she delivered her report. Walsh had been one of the few survivors from Captain Morrison's crew, and she had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy. The young woman who had held the bridge alone for 40 minutes while evacuation pods launched around her burning ship. "Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Carter wants to speak with you immediately." Rodriguez nodded. "Put her through, Lieutenant." Admiral Carter appeared on the screen, her expression mixing pride and concern. "Danny, I hope you're sitting down for this. We just received intelligence that the Vex are massing for another major offensive. Target appears to be the Centauri colonies." Rodriguez felt his blood chill. The Centauri system held over 2 billion people across 5 worlds. If the Vex attacked there with the same force they had brought to Velthara, it would be a slaughter that would make the Kethari evacuation look like a minor skirmish. "What's our response, Admiral?" Carter's expression shifted to something Rodriguez recognized from their pre-battle briefings. It was the look of someone preparing to do something completely insane and necessary. "We're putting together a joint task force, human ships, Kethari technology, and volunteer crews from 12 different species. The Federation Council is actually moving fast for once, probably because they're terrified the Vex will come for them next." "How many ships are we talking about?" 300 and counting. Turns out when you show the galaxy that someone is willing to fight the monsters, a lot of people want to help with the fighting." Carter paused. "Danny, I know you've been through hell already. If you want to take your people home and let someone else handle this one, nobody would blame you." Rodriguez looked out at the convoy of ships carrying Kethari refugees to their new home. He thought about Captain Morrison ramming his ship into a bio-vessel 10 times its size. He thought about Major Brooks setting off explosions that brought down bio-titans while enemy fire rained around her. He thought about Sergeant Martinez and his squad fighting their way through organic corridors that tried to digest them alive. And he thought about the Centauri colonies, where children were probably playing in crystal cities under alien suns, unaware that death was coming for them from the darkness between stars. "Admiral, with respect, the Centauri colonies are full of kids who don't deserve to die while the adults debate proper military protocol. When do we ship out?" Carter actually smiled at that. "I was hoping you'd say that. The task force assembles at the Rigel shipyards in 2 weeks. And Danny, this time we're not going in with converted cargo haulers and hope. We're going in with the best ships and weapons the galaxy can build. The Vex are about to learn what happens when you piss off the entire galactic community." The communication ended, leaving Rodriguez alone with Elder Myth Psi. The Kethari leader had listened to the entire conversation, her crystalline features reflecting the starlight from the viewport. "Captain, my people would like to contribute to this task force. We cannot offer warships or soldiers, but our medical, technology, and electromagnetic interference capabilities could be valuable." Rodriguez nodded. "Every bit helps, Elder. But this is going to be dangerous. We're talking about facing the Vex in open space, not holding defensive positions around evacuation zones. Captain Rodriguez, 6 months ago, my people believed that violence was always wrong, that there was no problem that could not be solved through patience and understanding. Then we met an enemy that wanted to consume our children, and we learned that sometimes the only answer to absolute evil is absolute resistance." Myth Psi's eyes glowed with determination. "We will stand with humanity against the darkness. It is what civilized beings do for each other." Rodriguez looked out at the stars again, thinking about the task force assembling at Rigel, about the species that had once dismissed humanity as barbaric primitives, now begging for human military protection. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. The Vex were coming again, and this time they would face not just one desperate species fighting alone, but an entire galaxy that had finally learned the value of standing together against the monsters in the dark. It was going to be one hell of a fight.